My study is on the prevalence of food insecurities in graduate students and the socio-demographic factors that impact food insecurity. But before we can talk about food insecurity in graduate students, I think we need to examine food insecurities within the United States. In 2016, 12.3 US households were food insecure. That's 42 million Americans struggling with food insecurity. And of that, 6 million children. There are a number of studies that have looked at the impact of food insecurity in children and have shown the negative correlation with food insecurity and social development, academic performance, and poor health in children. However, it wasn't until 2006 that the first study was conducted on college students at the University of Hawaii in Mano. Since then, there have been a number of studies conducted, and this current slide shows the different campuses and based on the sampling, the percentages of students who reported being food insecure. University of Alabama was the lowest at 14%. However, at the highest was a rural university in Oregon at 59%. The studies also identified certain factors associated with food insecurities. They included living arrangements. Students who lived alone or with roommates reported higher levels of food insecurity. Race and ethnicity. Students of color tended to be more food insecure than white students. An example is a study at Maryland where 56% of the students sampled identified as food insecure. However, that number increased to 61% of African Americans. Gender, women tended to report higher levels of food insecurity. Income was another concern. Low income had a direct effect with food insecurity. One example is the CUNY study, the City University of New York, where 37% of the students stated that their household income was under $20,000. And financial aid, students who receive financial aid were more likely to be food insecure. There were also implications that were addressed in some of the studies. Academic performance, both the study in Oregon and Illinois stated that students who had GPAs of 3.0 or above were less likely to be food insecure. Self-worth, study conducted in UCLA spoke about students whom felt shame and stigmatization and in fact would isolate themselves because of it, so that other students weren't aware of their situation of being food insecure. Physical and mental health, going back to the CUNY study, students reported being stressed, depressed, and having anxiety. And students who are food insecure are more likely to report poor physical health. The purpose of this study is to really look at graduate students. The studies that I've mentioned prior focused on undergraduate. And so while some of them had graduate students in the sampling, there are no studies that specifically looks at the effects of food insecurities on graduate students. So my hope is to delve into this. We know that by 2026, there are going to be 3.3 million graduate students enrolled in post-secondary institutions. But we are unclear of the associating factors with food insecurities, and actually we don't know much about food insecurities in graduate students. So the purpose of my study is to explore the prevalence of food insecurities and the possible associating factors. My research questions for this study include: what are the prevalence of food insecurity on graduate students? How and to what extent does food insecurities affect academic performance? Are there factors in food insecurities that may hinder their academic completion? The variables are similar to those of undergrad. My dependent variable will be food security levels, and my independent variables are very similar to the undergraduate students: living arrangements, race and ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, financial aid packaging. I am also including age as well as student levels. Is there a difference between master's and doctoral students when it comes to food insecurity? I will be using a mixed method approach of 24 questionnaire survey. The quantitative method will include a 10-item adult food security survey module from the USDA. It is the similar module used to test food insecurity within the United States. I'm also going to include a sociodemographic characteristic model survey, and a qualitative component will be three open-ended captures, three open-ended questions in the hopes of getting a more in-depth understanding of what graduate students deal with when they are food insecure. This test will be conducted at Montclair State University. It's where I'm employed, and I have a relationship and an understanding of the institution. We have 4,129 enrolled graduate students at Montclair. This will be a convenient sampling using a consensus approach. I will be inviting all graduate students to participate in the study via an online survey once IRB is approved at New England College and at Montclair. I'll be using three methods of data analysis. The USDA Food Security Survey module has its own methodology to distinguish food insecure from food secure individuals using a raw score scale, score, and descriptive statistics in measuring the frequency of food insecurity among the sample. To look at the difference between the independent variables, I will be using ANOVA to measure statistical significance, and to examine the strengths and weaknesses between each variable as it relates to food insecurity. I'll be using a multilinear regression. This will give me an opportunity to not only look at the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variables, but it'll also allow me to control for the overlap between the independent variables, and so that I can have a clear sense of how each individual variable impacts food insecurity. Limitations is that it's a convenient sampling, and so I can't generalize for the population. I'm relying on students to participate. And so if I have a low turnout, it may impact my ability to identify statistical significance. Food security is a sensitive topic, and so students may be reluctant to participate. On the other hand, students who are interested in the topic may likely participate, skewing my data if too many of those students choose to participate in the study. Response bias can occur in the qualitative portion. Also, the qualitative questions are in a survey. So unlike an interview, students may forego answering the questions because it's maybe too time consuming. Possible implications of this study. I'm hoping that we can have a better understanding of the linkage of food insecurity and the graduate experience, I hope to add to the extant body of research on food insecurity. Also, an opportunity to be able to recognize the signs of food insecurity among graduate students, to minimize the stigmatization by educating the community about food insecurity, and also to develop program services and support for these students through food pantries, food recovery programs, and hopefully changes in the regulations of SNAP. And finally, to have institutional policy changes that benefit food insecure students, both graduates and undergraduates. Thank you.